Thank you very much for that introduction, Jason. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing in terms of course redesign here at the University of North Texas. I'd also like to thank all the attendees for participating in this webinar. I've been working on a redesign of organic chemistry for several years now, and I ran across this website on the Lumina Foundation. I was preparing for my first day lecture last week, and something about this quote struck a chord with me. I've been trying to articulate exactly what it is we've been trying to do in terms of the redesign, and I think this fits nicely. You know, what does the higher education system need to look like to serve far more students effectively? And I think that's sort of been at the heart of what we've been doing. And if you look at what they suggest has to occur, is that the focus has to become a student-centered system, and to put the students figure out what they need, and then how do we give them the tools that they need to be successful in whatever course that we're teaching. And I think that's a little different than a lot of faculty who consider more from the institutional level, here's what we're offering them, rather than sharing the student's perspective in how to succeed in education. I presented a lot of the data that I'm going to present today last fall at the Transforming STEM Higher Education Conference hosted by the AACU and PCAL last fall. And I can tell you that the data that I'm presenting here is sort of on the cutting edge of what's being done in terms of course design for STEM courses. And so I'm really excited about the potential here. We've heard a lot about MOOCs and their popularity. I think this takes the step, goes one step further in utilizing technology, but retaining the human element. So we have to engage the students in order for them to succeed. And I think that's one of the things that's been missing with the MOOCs, is the students feel like they're all alone. I began my redesign in 2010, and a couple of years after I started, this report to the president came out, which really has served as the core of where I'm trying to take this course. And there's a drastic shortage of STEM majors that are completing, and so this report talks a lot about the data behind arriving at that conclusion, and then what are the steps, why are we losing the students, and what are the steps we can take to encourage more students to matriculate in the STEM disciplines. Sort of a roadmap of my presentation today. I'll tell you a little bit about the state of STEM and our recent results. I'd like to walk you through the NextGen concept, and it's a redesign program here at the University of North Texas that takes large enrollment courses and tries to redesign them to improve student performance. And then I'll talk specifically about my chemistry redesign in fairly lengthy detail, and talk about engaging the students, how we incorporated learner-centered strategies, and then what I think is a crucial piece of a redesign is validated assessment. And so can we tell the students what we want them to achieve specifically, and then measure whether or not they are meeting those expectations. And so those happen at a course-specific level, which I'm using ExamSoft as the assessment tool. Those can also occur in some of the newer pieces of our redesign, which I'll talk about, that relate more to discipline-specific content and institutional-specific content. So this goes beyond my course, and how does my course fit into what the institution is trying to achieve in general. And I think that's a piece that is lacking at a lot of in a lot of courses, is tying it in to the broader goals and these degree requirements. And then I'll also talk a little bit about student engagement and how we're attempting to validate an assessment for student engagement. It's been shown that engaged students perform better in courses. However, it's largely anecdotal evidence for student engagement. And so the NextGen program here at UNT is working on an instrument that will help us quantify student engagement, and I'll talk some about that. And then I'm always happy to answer questions. So the major problem in the STEM disciplines, only 40% of entering college students that declare STEM majors actually finish those degrees. and so that's a real problem when you look at the economic projections that indicate we need 1 million more STEM professionals over the next decade than we're going to graduate at current rates. And so, and this is from the report to the president, and there's been a lot of discussion about the reasons we're losing these students, and the two top reasons were lack of inspiration in low-level classes, and then frustration with weed-out courses. And my course fits into that category. I teach organic chemistry. Students that are majoring in biology can't even become a biology major until they pass my course. And so I felt a special connection with those students and wanted to make sure that my course was not simply a weed-out course. And then the third reason I think is underreported, and that's the fact that for faculty in the STEM disciplines, the STEM graduate programs are preparing researchers and not educators. During my time at Columbia University, I had a TA assignment for 3 semesters, but no real formal training in pedagogy or how to effectively teach undergraduates. And so I think that's a major issue that needs to be addressed. Okay, so I thought I would start with the results of our redesign so far, and I think this may be one possible solution, the format that we've developed. So when I talk to other faculty about the redesign, the general consensus has been, if you look at the retention rate for my course over the last 5 years, you can see that typically 65 to 70% of the students will pass. And most faculty would tell you that's just the nature of the course, and that your redesign will likely not have a huge impact there. Well, I was very excited to see that after we incorporated our first set of engaged learning activities last year, that our retention rate jumped significantly. And so the redesign has allowed me to increase the enrollment in my course, while I've actually been able to reduce the class size, and the retention rate has increased dramatically. A nice benefit of the redesign is it actually has decreased my effort in teaching. All of my lecture materials are posted online, and so I no longer have to go in and lecture to the students. And so my role in the class has taken on a little bit of a different tone. So you might say, well, if you're retaining more students, have you dropped the standards? And if we look at the end of the second semester organic course, I give an American Chemical Society standardized final exam, and so we can compare the performance of our students to those across the nation. And if we look at since the redesign began in the fall 2011, spring 2012, that's when I introduced the podcast lecture material. I saw a slight increase in student performance, but clearly the students were underperforming. The green bars represent students scoring at or above the national average on that ACS final. And so they were not doing well on the exam, and that's sort of been the benchmark that we've been using to measure our progress. And so when I eliminated the lectures and went to strictly problem-solving sessions, the student performance increased more dramatically. And then last year, again, as I said, I launched the NextGen phase, which was the engaged learning activities. I saw student performance increase even further. So we've seen a steady increase in performance. At the same time, we're retaining more students. The only thing that I was concerned with on this graph was that the number of students scoring in the bottom quartile seemed to have gone up a little. And so I did a little more analysis on that aspect, and I looked at the students that took both semesters of organic chemistry with me versus those that had transferred in and only took the second semester of organic chemistry. And I saw a dramatic difference in the performance of those groups. So students that had both semesters scored at the national average, and those that transferred in just for the second semester course scored significantly lower. And so that's something that we're looking at and trying to determine exactly what's going on. I gave, and this was this past week, I decided at the beginning of the second semester course this year to administer a pretest covering concepts from organic chemistry first semester. And you can see that students that were in my course last semester, again, scored significantly higher than those that took the first semester course with someone else. And so we're now trying to figure out if there are some remediation activities, pinpoint exactly where the students are showing deficiencies, and can we address that as they begin the second semester course to improve their performance in the final. The NextGen program here at UNT is, again, it's a program that's designed to redesign large enrollment courses so that the students become more engaged. And I tell my students, the first bullet point here, one of the things you get from a NextGen course is a solid list of what is expected of you out of the course. And I tell the students this is probably the most transparent course that they're going to take. Certainly, we give them the objectives, and then we measure whether or not they're meeting those objectives. These also include a significant amount of material that's posted online, which allows the students to self-pace, and then when they come to class, they're not simply sitting there listening to a lecture. We actually have them involved and engaged in activities that help them master the content. So that's sort of an overview of the NextGen program, and there have been hundreds of courses that have gone through this redesign program here at UNT. The process begins with determining what the student learning outcomes should be for the course, and so you have to ask yourself what the student is expected to know and be able to do. And this is useful to the students as well as to the faculty. The students know exactly what concepts you're requiring them to learn and master. And for the faculty, it helps to focus the instructional strategies that you use in the course to focus more on the objectives that you're trying to achieve in the students, or the outcomes you're trying to achieve in the students. So it helps to focus everyone's effort more specifically on topics that are of the greatest importance. And one of the nice things about the redesign, once you have written all the goals for the course, you can now start to tie those to program goals, institutional goals, and accreditation standards. And I think this is certainly where education is headed in terms of accountability, but there aren't a lot of courses out there that are tied to the accreditation and institutional goals in a manner that they probably should be. So that's certainly an area that could use improvement. So the NextGen course redesign program is based on aligning your course objectives once you've decided what those are going to be with the instructional strategies that you're using to help the students master those objectives. And then, of course, you have to have an assessment piece that measures whether or not students have met the objective. In my experience in going through the NextGen program is that these three things refine on each other. In other words, you have some assessment items that you ask that don't necessarily fit well with the course objectives, and so you have to ask yourself, do I want to get rid of the assessment item, or do I want to rewrite the course objectives? If the students aren't achieving the objectives according to the assessment, then you have to look at your instructional strategy and see whether or not you're giving them the tools to succeed for that particular objective. And so it's a data-driven approach where you're getting, you know what you want the students to achieve, and you're measuring whether or not they do, and then the instruction has to match up. So the NextGen program uses a three-level model, and so what we start with is determining what are the goals for the course. And so you'll have generally from 3 to 8 course goals, and these are really broad statements, such as the student will understand literature. Well, it's difficult to write a test item to that. It's too broad, and so under the goal, now you have to break out some general learning outcomes where the student, these are more specific than the goal, but they're still too broad to be measured quantitatively using the assessment. And so then you take each one of these general learning outcomes and you write specific learning outcomes that are at the level that they can be assessed, and they cover very specific topics. And so you write the test questions to the specific learning outcomes, and you say if the students achieve or attain these 4 specific learning outcomes, then I can say that they've mastered the general learning outcome. And so an example of that is shown here. And so if we had a specific learning outcome, determine the main idea, theme of a passage or a piece of literature, that's certainly something that you can write a test question for. And so an example of a test item that could be written is shown there. And so that's sort of the general principle behind the NextGen 3-level model. Again, we can take the students' attainment results from the specific learning outcomes, and then those can be, the weighted average can give you the student's attainment on a general outcome, and then once you've gotten to the general outcome level, that can be extrapolated all the way to the goal level, which can connect with either the course goals or institutional goals, whichever objectives you felt were important. So it's a nice system that you can, and I provide all the learning outcomes to the students on my syllabus, and so they have a list of every goal for the course, every general learning outcome, and every specific learning outcome. And so they know when I go to write a test item, I'm going to be writing them to the specific learning outcomes. And so it helps focus their effort in the areas that they know that I'm going to be testing them on. And this is where ExamSoft enters the picture, and ExamSoft plays a pivotal role in the assessment piece in generating data in real time that I really wouldn't otherwise be able to obtain. But they have a category feature, and so I can write or transfer my learning outcomes as categories in ExamSoft. And so I've written over 1,500 questions, and each one of those is tied to a specific learning outcome. Furthermore, you can add other categories, Bloom's taxonomy. I also use a level of difficulty, and so you can really generate a huge amount of data that tells you exactly where your students are struggling and where you should probably spend some more time in class. So that's how we use the categories. So in terms of writing the course objectives for my own course, I actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about, what are the things that I want my students to take away from this course. And of course, I'm teaching organic chemistry, so if they don't come away with a basic understanding of organic molecules and how they react, that would be a deficiency on my part. But you also have to start to think about who your students are and what you're preparing them for. And my students, it's typically a lot of pre-med majors, and so you have to evaluate the different categories of students and what you expect of each of them. And then I think one of the things that we should spend more time as faculty thinking about is how are we going to teach important lessons beyond our own discipline-specific content. And I'll come back to this in a few minutes, but things like teamwork and these soft skills. And then finally, if you're not able to assess it, should it really be a course objective? And so I think the assessment piece is crucial in any redesign, so you can show that the redesign you've implemented has actually achieved the desired outcome. So I pulled this chart off of the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and this was allowing employers to rate the skills and qualities that they found most important in recruiting new candidates. And so I highlighted the number 7, which is technical knowledge related to the job. So that would be the content I'm teaching in organic chemistry. That doesn't even make the top 5 in terms of what employers are in need of. And so if we look at this list, most of the ones up at the top are what we would refer to as soft skills. And so my question became, how do I incorporate some activities in my course that help boost students' performance on these things that employers are most interested in them possessing? And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about that and how to do that, and I think we've started to get a handle on it. These are the course objectives for my first semester course, and the first four really relate to the organic chemistry and different aspects of organic chemistry that the students really need to be able to master, that they'll need no matter what degree path they're going on. They need these topics to be successful in those future courses that build on this foundation in organic chemistry. The last three, which I've highlighted in red, these get at more of the soft skills aspects, and having students understand the relationship of organic chemistry to their everyday lives. That's sort of a discipline-specific goal, and not necessarily so much a course goal. And then I want students to have an awareness of the U.S. competitiveness in science and technology, and the globalization of science in general, and the implications that has, which is sort of more of a cultural view. And then finally, students will demonstrate elements of collaboration, leadership, innovation. These are all the soft skills that employers say they're looking for, and so I'm incorporating those as goals in my course, and I'll talk in a few minutes about how I go about assessing whether or not students are achieving under those goals. And so I said I'd written a set of objectives for my course. I'm in the process, and I hope for next year's course to be able to tie these to the broader focus in academia on degree qualifications. And so can I tie some of the objectives or some of the things that I'm doing in my course to Lumina's degree qualifications profile? Can I tie it to the tuning movement? And I think those things can be done. It's just a matter of designing the activities and then writing the outcomes based on those objectives. What really got me started in the redesign was an article that I read in Nature Chemistry back in 2010 by Jeff Moore at UIUC, and he had developed a fully online chemistry course. And so this was back when this was uncommon, and they actually co-taught the course with students in China. And I contacted Professor Moore, and he was very gracious and shared a lot of his course materials and general information with me. And so I began in 2010. This came out later, and this idea of the flipped classroom has become really popular. And again, I think this allows for you to put the content online and yet still engage the students in the classroom. I think that's the key here, is as a mentor, helping the students succeed in whatever discipline they've chosen. In terms of my course, Redesign, I've recorded podcasts that cover the entire year of lecture material for organic chemistry, and I posted all those on UNT's iTunes U site. And so when the students register for the course, they get access to these podcasts. They have to log in with their university ID and password, but once they log in, they see my course, and they have the lecture material covering the entire year. So that's the course format. In terms of the podcasts themselves, I didn't simply record me giving a lecture in class. I designed each podcast to cover a specific topic, and I used a smart board where I could write on the screen while the video was playing, and so these are very short. I try to keep them 3 to 10 minutes in length to keep the students' attention, but each one is geared toward a specific topic. And so if we link those then to the learning outcomes, the students could see that they're not mastering content, and then actually trace it back to the material in the podcast that they should probably revisit. So once I had all the material online, that opened up a lot of time in class. Initially, I used this time for instructor-led problem sessions and incorporated a few other activities. One of which was a STEM incentives program. And so on the first day of class, I had a lecture on and gave students information about graduate school. Most students don't know anything about graduate school at this point in their undergraduate career. I talked to them about careers in chemistry and salaries. I even go as far as to look up what my classmates were doing, what they're doing now, and some other topics. And one of the things I did to demonstrate the globalization of science and scientific research is that I took the first 20 articles from the first issue of the Journal of American Chemical Society at the 4 years shown, so 4 decades worth, and I posted those online and just had them go through and list the author's home institution for each of the articles. And this very nicely demonstrated the globalization of scientific research. In 1982, it was a very small percentage that were international, and now it's over half. And so this was a very simple activity that I think communicates an important point to the students. And that's one of the things that I've tried to focus on in my redesign is activities that don't require a huge amount of effort on their part or on my part, yet will teach a specific point effectively. And that's sort of the trick. So the instructor-led problem sessions, while I expected those to be more engaged, it turned out it was mostly me standing up in front of a bunch of students working problems with less than ideal engagement. And so I decided to change the in-class format. And this is a list from the report to the president of all the activities that are known to engage students in large enrollment courses. And most classes now incorporate some degree one or more of these. I focused this redesign on the small group discussion and peer instruction. That was based on my own experience as an undergraduate. I worked with a group of other chemistry majors, and the group spent a lot of time, and I think that really benefited me. And so I wanted to give that opportunity to my students. So students now, when they show up for class, they only have to show up half of the time that they're registered for. So I have 3 hours of lecture and 1 hour of recitation. I now have, so 4 hours a week. The students only meet now for 2 hours a week, and that time is spent completely on small group activities. And so we go in and we rearrange a classroom. I have 192 students that I divided into 32 groups of 6, and so half of those students will meet for 2 hours, and then we can look at not only how they're mastering the content, but we can also start to see some of these soft skills and how they're interacting in interpersonal dynamics. So that's been a really interesting avenue to explore. In terms of the group assignments, these are relatively straightforward. I started out the first semester actually having them work on more complicated problems where they had to write out solutions, but that still was a great deal of effort on my part to grade, and so I've now gone to completely multiple choice in terms of assessment. I can write really difficult multiple choice questions. You can have multiple correct answers, and so I can make these as hard or as easy as I want, but the nice thing is no one has to grade these. They just enter their answers into the computer, and that's it. And so this would be a typical assignment that they would receive. They would come to class, work on whatever the assignment was for that day, and then they were each responsible for uploading their own answer set in ExamSoft at some time later. But this has encouraged accountability with the students. If they're not there when a group assignment is being worked on, they get a 0 for that group assignment. So attendance is mandatory, and I routinely have around 90% attendance. So this has been a huge plus in getting the students to show up and actually do work. All right, so I said this was done through ExamSoft, so you can see on the left with the categories, I'm able to tag the question with the specific learning outcome, the goal, the difficulty level, and so when the students, they work on the assignment together, and then they each have to log in and select their answers and upload those. One of the nice things about the program is that I can do a longitudinal analysis, and I can do this basically at any time during the semester. I can look at the students' mastery of any of the content that we've covered. An example of that would be what I've shown here. So I think this is at the end of the semester, but I have each specific learning outcome, and then I have student mastery in the far right related to how well they've done on that specific outcome. And the nice thing about this helps me pinpoint areas where either the topic is very difficult, and so you would expect a lower number here, or it's an area where I need to go back and consider redesign and some additional activities to help boost student performance. And the one that's shown here, pKa values and acidity, that's typically a very hard concept for students. And so we're developing new activities to help them better master that particular topic. I can look at sort of student learning in real time. So I went through and looked at all the learning objectives that were covered in the first half that were also covered in the second half. And you can see that all of these improved in terms of student performance, except for the second one, which the number of items going into that analysis is relatively low, so it's perhaps not statistically relevant, but you can get a general idea for how students are mastering the content over time. I had one exam last year that the students, I had two different sections that both took the exam, and the performance was terrible. The average was a 56 on both, and so I knew that before I left our testing center. My students take their exams online in our testing facility, which can accommodate 130 students, and so I could see the results and immediately plan some remediation activities, and so I let them upload their answers for these other activities, and then I gave them an opportunity to retake the test if they were interested, and most did, and you can see that the improvement, the average score improved to a 70. So the students improved, and that was done in real time, and I just had to make more time in the schedule for that material. The students, when they take an exam in the testing center, they don't ever see the questions that were on the test again, and that allows me to use them in future years. But they do get a report from ExamSoft that tells them, based on every specific learning outcome that was on the test, whether or not they mastered that content. And so the students can, again, they can track these back to the podcast material and go back and spend some extra time specifically in the areas that they still need to work on in terms of mastery. And so this is a really nice feature for them. They do see the score as soon as they submit their answers, but again, they don't see any of the questions again after that. Some of the other things that we're working on in the course, I mentioned that we're trying to quantify student engagement. Again, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there that engaged students perform better, but there aren't any quantitative measures of that. And so we're working, and this is the NextGen program, and Ron Caraveau specifically is working on developing an instrument that we can quantify student engagement. And we would expect the results, especially for this course, to score very highly in terms of student engagement, because that's 100% of their in-class time. One of the things that I've been very excited about recently, I started assigning teams, the groups of 6, randomly through Blackboard, and I haven't been all that happy about the makeup of the teams themselves. Some of them have functioned really well, others have functioned really poorly, and someone recently mentioned the CATME site to me, and this is a tool that you can use to assign teams, and then you can have the students do peer evaluations through CATME, and so this gets at some of their soft skills. And so I was very excited about this. I now use it to assign the teams, and so the students will complete a survey, the CATME Team-Maker survey, and this just asks them a series of questions, and you can control which questions it asks, and then you can distribute the students according to their responses, and you can weight different factors in assigning groups. So gender, race, GPA, the previous grade in the course was obviously an important one. If they made a good grade in OChem 1, I want those students spread out as much as I can over all the groups so that all the groups have students that did well. And then I also get some additional information, major, discipline. One of the most important that I felt going into this was the leadership role. I was looking for students that wanted to be a leader in their group, and I had a hard time figuring out which students are going to do this. And so this allows me to weight their responses and distribute the students that want to lead their group across all of them. And so we've just started doing this method for team formation this semester, and so we're going to see how the results unfold. So again, I said the students can do their peer evaluations through the program, and this is based on the 5 dimensions of team member contributions. So how they work with teammates of diverse backgrounds, are they contributing, do they have good interpersonal skills, and just being able to evaluate teamwork in general is an important skill, and then recognizing team processes and outcomes. The nice thing about this program is that it's based on science, and so it's a validated method for conducting peer evaluations. In previous semesters that I've used the peer evaluations, the students were less than satisfied with the methods that we use that weren't validated. And the program also does a rater calibration, and so it introduces students to the underlying science and then lets them practice evaluating peers. So this is the latest thing that we're doing in the redesign, and I'm really excited to see how this turns out. But this is a way that we can get at the soft skills and a valid measurement that we can report in terms of attainment. So I just want to wrap up by a quick recap. So we've incorporated some learner-focused instructional practices that have improved student performance. Our NextGen model is a transparent model where we tell the students exactly what we want them to know, and then we make sure that we give them the tools to succeed and can assess whether or not they have mastered that content. ExamSoft has played a crucial role in providing the real-time data that I can use to adjust the course on the fly if necessary to help the students succeed. And then we can start to look at some basic milestones and be able to communicate those to the students themselves, other programs and accreditation bodies. And then I think the key is the quantitative assessment, going back to the course level, the discipline level, and even institutional goals. So with that, I would like to thank ExamSoft for hosting the webinar, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Petros, for your time this morning. We do appreciate you sharing your expertise and experience with the group today. So with that, we'll pause for a moment and allow attendees to enter questions into the question panel. One question we do have is, previously in the webinar you had mentioned changes you had made to the course. Are you able to discuss and give examples of additional changes you made into the course to affect student engagement and learning?
It's been an ongoing process, and at the end of every semester I evaluate what worked and what didn't, and there's been a change at almost every stage of the process. And you know, the reason I incorporated the latest thing with assigning teams was that the way that I was assigning them didn't seem to work very well. You know, I went from doing instructor-led problem sessions to student-led problem sessions, and that was just based on the feedback that the students weren't engaged, and now they pretty much have to be. And so I've made lots of changes over the course of the redesign.
Very good, thank you. At this time, I would like to remind everyone of an upcoming webinar entitled Creating Tests That Measure Critical Thinking in Health Science Professions, Test Item Writing That is Both Art and Science. This is presented by Dr. Ainsley Nybert and is scheduled for February 17th. To register for this and other webinars and to view other resources, please do go visit learn.examsoft.com/resources. Also, as a reminder, within the next few days, all attendees and registrants will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. Please do feel free to share this webinar with your colleagues and additional constituents as you see fit. Also, as one additional reminder, upon completion of the webinar today, you will receive an opportunity to participate in a 7-question survey. Those who complete the survey will be entered into a drawing for a $25 gift card to Amazon.com. If there are no additional questions, I would like to take this time to thank you, Dr. Petros, for your expertise and time this morning. If you do have additional questions and we're not able to get them answered today or would like to ask questions after the webinar, please do feel free to email info@examsoft.com and we will get an answer for you as soon as possible. This concludes today's webinar session. Thank you everyone for attending and thank you for your time. Dr. Petros, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
And with that, have a good afternoon, good morning everyone, and we'll see you next time.